All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Welcome. It's Tuesday, July 18th, and this is mainly a planning meeting, but for the summer. I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. The Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of the lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain the responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. I'll ask everyone to please turn your cell phones off or place them on vibrate just to keep from disturbing the meeting. And I'll remind council of declaration of pecuniary interest. If it arises, you can declare it now, or if something comes up later, declare it then. So I'm going to look for a motion to go into the public meeting for zoning bylaw amendments. Moved by Deputy Mayor Webb, seconded by Councillor Clement. All in favor, and that's carried. Okay, our first, we have three zoning bylaw amendments. So I'm just going to read this once, but I'll do the title part of it for each application. This is a statutory meeting held under Section 34 of the Planning Act. The owners applicants are James and Natalie Wild. The property is described as part of Lot 14 and 15, Concession 6, municipally known as 60 Fire Road 75B, having a property roll number of 153101005349900. Any persons may attend the public meeting and or make verbal or written representation either in support or opposition of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Please keep your microphone off and or your microphone muted and your video off during the meeting until the chair invites you to comment regarding the planning matter. If a person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make a written submission to the Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen before the proposed zoning bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make written submission to the Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen before the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is passed, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as a party. If you wish to be notified of the passing of the zoning bylaw amendment, you must make written request to the Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen. So with that, I'll turn it over to Arya.
Through to you, Mayor. Good morning, council and members of the public. So the purpose and effect of this report is to present for the consideration and a requisite approval of council an application to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw number 1995-42 as amended in order to permit the redevelopment of a new single detached seasonal recreational dwelling unit while also introducing certain site-specific regulations. So the recommendation is that subject to any new information or public comments received prior to or at the statutory public meeting today, the draft bylaw be passed as presented, and the balance of this report be received. So just a little bit of background information pertaining to this property. So the owners are James and Natalie Wild. I do believe they're either on the call or in person here today. The property description is part lots 14 and 15, concession 6, with a municipal address of 60 Fire Road 75B in the Methuen ward. And the roll number is 153101000534900. The type of planning application approval that is being sought today is Section 34 of the Planning Act. Just a little bit of description as to the lot itself. The subject lands comprise approximately 0.88 hectares, which roughly translates to about 2 acres, with frontage along Cashbog Lake. There's currently an existing recreational dwelling unit on the subject lands comprising a total of 126 square meters, which is roughly translates to about 1358 square feet. The property assessment data provided by the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation indicates no presence of any other accessory structure on the subject property. However, the attached site plan does indicate the presence of several small frame sheds. And the single detached dwelling unit is presently serviced by an existing septic system located just southeast of the dwelling unit. The applicants are proposing to construct a new septic system slightly further back from the shoreline, as well as not within the 15-meter buffer of an unevaluated wetlands that is on the subject lot. The current setback from the high watermark is the high watermark of Catchbog Lake to the existing recreational dwelling unit is approximately 11.2 meters, which roughly translates to about 36 feet. The proposed development does not intend on reducing this setback and will intend on or will serve to increase and improve upon it. Just one note that I did want to make in relation to the site plan is that in the chart, just right of the site plan, where it stipulates 100 square meters should actually reflect 64 square meters. This was just data that was changed after the application was sent over. So the proposed redevelopment, the applicants are requesting permission to redevelop the subject property by constructing a new recreational dwelling unit as well as a detached garage. A demolition permit will be required to remove the existing structures to make room for the development mentioned above. As proposed, the new recreational dwelling unit, as well as its lakeside uncovered deck, will have a gross floor area of approximately 257 square meters, which roughly translates to about 2,768 square feet. The height of the proposed recreational dwelling unit will be less than the allocated 9 meters, which is 30 feet permitted in the seasonal residential zone. As previously mentioned, the development will result in a net increase in total lot coverage from 2.28% to 4.7%, which is well within the allocated 15% required under the seasonal residential zone. So this application presently before council must maintain conformity to the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the township and county's official plans, as well as the township zoning bylaw. So just a little bit about the PPS, we call it, and the growth plan. Both the growth plan and the PPS permit resource-based and residential development within rural areas. While also including policies to protect significant natural heritage features. And section 2.294 of the growth plan stipulates that resource-based development within rural areas must be compatible with the surrounding rural landscape, as well as the scale, character, and capacity of the resource. Section 4.2.45 permits infill development within the 30-meter vegetation protection zone. That's just fancy terminology for buffer, provided that the development restores to the maximum extent possible the ecological functions and features of the developed shoreline areas. While the proposed development is taking place marginally on the existing building footprint, no reductions in high watermark setback standards are being proposed. Additionally, the existing dwelling unit is situated within, actually, I would say the entire current structure is within the floodplain of Catchbog Lake. The proposed development will be entirely outside of this floodplain and further back from the high watermark than the existing dwelling unit, save and except for the proposed detached garage, which has been approved by Crow Valley Conservation Authority. So there are no complications in relation to the PPS. Therefore, there is maintained conformity with the PPS and growth plan. According to the county's official plan, County of Peterborough's official plan, the site is designated as shoreland areas and the waterfront. And policies of the county's official plan permit residential land use development within the shoreline area, while encouraging the protection and restoration of natural heritage features. So the plan states that the built form along the shoreline should not dominate the natural form and encourage the provision of access to the waterfront for public and private users, whichever obviously is appropriate. So based on a site visit conducted by township staff, it is determined that the proposed development is taking place on a portion of the property that is fairly flat and free of any natural vegetation. Additionally, the general location of the proposed cottage is taking place in an area of the property already disturbed by existing development. The developable areas of this property are entirely limited to the location of the proposed recreational dwelling unit, as there are considerable flood hazards in areas of the property that contain floodplains. So based on the analysis above, it is the township's planning opinion that the proposed development generally maintains or conforms to the spirit and intent of the county's official plan. So just a little bit about the township's official plan. The subject property is currently designated as shoreline in the township's official plan. The township's OP recognizes permanent and recreational dwellings as permitted uses in the shoreline designation. Furthermore, all development in the shoreline designation are required to incorporate a minimum 30-meter setback from the high watermark of all lakes. Policies in the township's official plan are aimed to preserve and protect the shoreline and the natural vegetation. Section 3.341B2 and 3 of the township's OP states that minor variances and zoning changes to accommodate proposed expansions of structurally permanent nature to existing structures that further reduces, the keyword there is further reduces, any applicable minimum water yard setback shall not be permitted unless it is a matter of public health. Furthermore, on existing lots of record where it is not possible to achieve a 30-meter setback, a new building shall be set back as far as possible from the high water mark. So the proposed development serves to improve the site by relocating the recreational dwelling unit to a location of the property that is not prone to any flood hazards as opposed to the current one. Furthermore, no reductions are being proposed to setback standards as it relates to the proposed septic system nor the dwelling unit actually. So there is so this application maintains conformity, or it conforms with the spirit and intent of the township's official plan. And finally, the zoning bylaw. According to Schedule A1 of bylaw number 1995-42 as amended, the subject property is currently zoned seasonal residential. If approved, the application will serve to rezone the subject lands to Special District 268 or SD 268, which introduces certain site-specific regulations for the redevelopment of the seasonal dwelling unit as well as a detached garage. Accordingly, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment being submitted for council's approval includes site-specific setbacks and other provisions intended to legally recognize reduced setbacks for the redevelopment of the cottage. As previously mentioned, the entire dwelling unit will be pushed outside the flood hazard of the property. A reduction of the side yard setback will be required to accommodate this location. While the detached garage is being located within the floodplain as identified on the site plan up right now. The scope and structure is limited in size. So and the Conservation Authority has provided their approval in that regard. Following our review and assessment of this application within the context of relevant land use planning policies, it is the township's planning opinion that the subject application conforms to the growth plan, the county of Peterborough's official plan, the township's official plan, and the zoning bylaw, as well as maintaining consistency with the or conformity, I should say, with the provincial policy statement. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right, then I'm going to ask 3 times, but first in opposition and then 3 times anybody in favor. So for the first time, is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Second time, anybody wishing to speak in opposition? And the third time, anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application? The applicants are here, I think. Do you have anything to add to that?
Good morning, through you, Mr. Mayor. I am the agent on this file. I just wanted to add a few small things. My name is Holly Richards Conley, and we have been working very closely with Crow Valley on this file, and as such have already submitted a permit to them, which has already been paid for. And the second thing is Peterborough Public Health has also reviewed our permit submission for the new septic system and have no issues with it, and will just release the permit if council approves the application today.
Okay, thank you. Okay, for the second time, is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application? And the third time, anybody wishing to speak in favor? All right, hearing none, I'll open it up to council. Is there any comments or questions around this application? If not, we have the recommendations. Anybody got any questions or comments? Recommendation is here that this be passed. Does somebody want to move that? Okay, Councilor Clements moving it, and Deputy Mayor Webb is seconding it. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so if we could deal with these bylaws individually as we go through these three applications that we processes.
It's gonna be ended.
All right, okay. The end of that then, so sorry about that. Okay, so we'll move into the next zoning bylaw amendment. And this is for William Hasty. The property is described as lot 30 in section 8. Initially known as 119 Fire Road 85E, having a property roll number of 153101007445500. So, and then everything else that I read, anybody, it's an open meeting, so anybody can comment on it. So, all right then, so I'll turn it over to Arya.
Through to you, Mayor. The purpose and effect of this report is also to present for the consideration and requisite approval of council, an application to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 1995-42 as amended in order to permit the redevelopment of a single detached recreational dwelling unit while also introducing certain site specific regulations, almost the same thing as the previous application, and it's up right there for everyone to see. So the recommendation of my report is that subject to any new information or public comments received prior to or at the statutory public meeting, that the draft bylaw be passed as presented and that the balance of this report be received. Again, just a little bit of background information pertaining to this file. The owner is William Hasty. Property and their agent is Holly Richard Conley. A property description, part lot 30, concession 8, municipal address of 119 Fire Road 85E Methuen in the Methuen ward. As well as roll number 153101000744500. The type of approval being sought today is the section 34 under the Planning Act, and no other planning applications are in process for this file. Or this property, I should say. So the subject lands comprise approximately 0.58 acres, which roughly translates to about 1.44 acres with shoreline frontage along Jack Lake. There's currently an existing recreational dwelling unit on the subject property comprising a total square footage of 165 square meters, which roughly translates to about 1,776 square feet. Property survey data provided by Elliott Parr Surveying on November 11th, 2021 indicates the presence of several accessory structures, including 3 framed sheds. During the requisite site visit, Township staff determined that one of the larger frame sheds is a sleeping cabin with a second story. Township records indicate that the permit was issued for the sleeping cabin, so it is a legal structure. This application does not serve to alter any accessory structure on the property. The single detached recreational dwelling unit is currently not being serviced by an individual septic system. As part of the development process, the applicants intend on installing a new septic system entirely outside of the 30-meter high watermark setback of Jack Lake. So the proposed redevelopment, the applicants are requesting permission to redevelop the subject property by constructing a new recreational dwelling unit with an abutting lakeside covered deck and screen porch. A demolition permit will be required to remove the existing dwelling to make room for the development mentioned above. As proposed, the new recreational dwelling unit, as well as its accompanying decks and porches, will have a gross floor area of approximately 198 square meters, which roughly translates to about 2,138 square feet. The height of the proposed recreational dwelling unit will be less than that allocated in the seasonal residential zone. And for everyone's information, that's 9 meters, which is roughly around 30 feet. As proposed, the development will result in a net increase in total lot coverage from 4.1% to 5.9%, which is it's way less than the 15% allocated or afforded to the seasonal residential zone. So this application must presently before council must maintain conformity to the provincial policy statement, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the township and county's official plan, as well as the township zoning bylaw. And please forgive me, I know this is reiterating information, but just for record, I do have to go through it. Both the growth plan and the provincial policy statement permit resource-based and residential development within rural areas, while also including policies to protect significant natural heritage features. Section 2.294 of the growth plan stipulates that resource-based development within rural areas must be compatible with the surrounding rural landscape. And again, section 4.2.4.5 of the growth plan permits infill development within the 30-meter high watermark the 30-meter vegetation protection zone, again, fancy word for buffer, provided that the development restores to the maximum extent possible the ecologic features and functions of the shoreline. The proposed development will be developed within most of the existing building footprint and further beyond it. As the development will be taking place primarily to the existing foundation, setback standards as it relates to the high water mark are being maintained and improved upon, despite the increase in size of the recreational dwelling unit. Therefore, the proposal does not conflict with the provincial policies. And back to the County of Peterborough's official plan. According to the county's official plan, the site is designated as shoreline areas on the waterfront. Policies of the county's official plan permit residential land use development within the shoreline areas, while encouraging the protection and restoration of natural heritage features. And the plan kind of builds on this and states that the built form along the shoreline should not dominate the natural form and encourage the provision of access to the waterfront for private and public users. The proposed development is taking place on a portion of the property that is fairly flat and free of any vegetation. We did do a site visit out there. The location is currently disturbed by an existing recreational dwelling unit, and a large portion of the proposed development will take place on the existing footprint. So therefore, it is the township's planning opinion that the application conforms to the intent or the spirit and intent of the county's official plan. The subject, so just a little bit about the township's official plan. The subject property is currently designated as shoreline in the township's official plan. And the township's OP again recognizes permanent as well as recreational or quote unquote cottage dwellings as permitted uses in the shoreline designation. Furthermore, all development in the shoreline designation are required to incorporate a minimum 30-meter setback. Section again, 3.341B23 of the township's official plan states that minor variances and zoning changes to accommodate proposed extensions of a structurally permanent nature that further reduce any applicable minimum water yard setback shall not be permitted unless it's a matter of public health. Furthermore, on existing lots of record where it is not possible to achieve the 30-meter setback, the new building should be set back as far as possible from the high water mark. So as previously mentioned in this report, the redevelopment of the existing dwelling unit will take place within the 30-meter high watermark setback. And this is mainly due to topographic constraints, site-specific considerations, and hydro easements. A scope natural heritage evaluation was not required, seeing as the development further conforms with the growth plan and the scale of which would not constitute any form of overdevelopment of a shoreline on an existing lot of record. Additionally, the only natural heritage feature that was determined on or adjacent to the property, it was a lake. The proposed development serves to improve the site by locating the proposed septic system entirely outside the 30-meter high watermark setback. And the proposed new dwelling unit will also be pushed back further from the shoreline of Jack Lake. So therefore, it is the township's planning opinion that the application maintains the spirit and intent of the township's official plan. And finally, the zoning bylaw. According to Schedule A1 of bylaw number 1995-42 as amended, the subject property is currently zoned seasonal residential. If approved, the application will serve to rezone the subject lands to special district 269 and introduce certain site-specific regulations for the redevelopment of the cottage. All existing accessory uses will be maintained to their existing standards, no changes or alterations. Accordingly, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment includes site-specific, or I should say, certain site-specific setbacks and other provisions legally intended to recognize reduced setbacks for the development or the redevelopment. As previously mentioned, the applicants are proposing to increase setback standards for the new recreational dwelling unit, as well as installing a new septic system entirely outside the high watermark setback. So there's certain net improvements being had. So following our review and assessment of this application within the context of relevant land use planning policies, is the township's planning opinion that the subject application conforms to the growth plan, the county's official plan, the township's official plan, and the zoning bylaw, and is also consistent with the PPS, which is a provincial policy. And that concludes my report to council.
All right, thank you, Erica. Okay then, so for the first time, is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Second time, anybody wishing to speak in opposition? And the third time, anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none, is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application? Is the applicant here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's Holly Richards-Conley, and I'm the agent on this file as well. I have nothing else to add except similar to the last application, Peterborough Public Health has reviewed our permit submission and have approved it and will release it pending approval of the file today.
Thank you. Okay, second time, anybody wishing to speak in favor? Third time, anybody wishing to speak in favor? Seeing none, I'll open up the council. Any questions or comments around this application?
Through you, Chair, can you put some clarity on the septic system? Is they're going to use the old septic system for the new dwelling and they're putting a new septic system in for the bunkie?
Through to you, Mr. Mayor. Now I will err to Holly on this, but it is my understanding that there is no septic system currently at the moment, and they're improving the site by including a septic system. And the new septic system, or the proposed one, is going to be entirely outside the highway.
Holly, did you?
Yeah, I can add to that. The new septic system will service all of the habitable spaces on the property.
Well, the thing that's confusing me is the new septic system. That indicates there was an old one. So there is no septic system now, and there's only going to be one. And will the bunkie be hooked up to it?
Yeah.
Through to you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe that's the case.
Well, that's what she just said, all of this.
Have no space in the recreation.
Okay,
And are bunkies allowed to have running water, sewers?
Through to you, Mr. Mayor, I would say that that would require a planning application.
Okay, thanks.
all right then. So is there any other questions around the application? There is a recommendation here. Somebody want to move it?
Make a motion, we go with the recommendation of planner to approve the.
Okay, with Mayor Webb that we approve this application, second by Councillor Flagler. All in favor? And that carried. All right, our final zoning application here is under section 34 of the Planning Act. The owner applicant is Elizabeth Retzer. The property is described as lot 23, concession 3, known as 55 Fire Road 83C upper, having a property roll number of 153101000709600. I'll turn it over to Arya for the report.
Through to you, Mr. Mayor. Purpose and effect of this report is also to present for consideration and requisite approval of council an application to amend the comprehensive zoning bylaw 1995-42 as amended in order to permit the redevelopment of a new single detached seasonal recreational dwelling unit while also introducing certain site-specific regulations. The recommendation is that subject to any new information or public comments received prior to or at the statutory public meeting, the draft bylaw be passed as presented and that the balance of this report be received. So again, background information pertaining to this file, and it's up there for us all to see. The owner of the property is Elizabeth Retzer. Her agent is Holly Richards-Conley as well. And the property description, this is a mouthful, but part lot 23, plan 35, lot 47, and part of block N, registered plan 45R 4839, part 3, concession 3. Yes. The municipal address is 55 Fire Road 83C upper in the Methuen ward. And the roll number is 153101000709600. And the type of planning approval being sought today is under the Planning Act of Section 34. A site visit was conducted on the property on July 19, 2022. The subject lands comprise approximately 0.4 hectares, which roughly translates to about 1 acre, with frontage along Methuen Lake. The application indicates frontage of roughly 46.2 meters, which roughly translates to about 161 feet. Vehicular access to the property is provided via Fire Route 83C upper. The property subject of this application is currently occupied by an existing seasonal recreational dwelling unit comprising a total gross floor area, I should say, of 114 square meters, which roughly translates to about 1,200 square feet. Several smaller accessory structures are presently dispersed in the subject property, inclusive of an existing sleeping cabin or bunkie, framed sheds, and a barrel sauna. The sleeping cabin is an existing legal non-compliant structure that is permitted within the current zone of the property. This application will not alter the size, use, nor the location of any accessory structure on the property. I do believe that the bunkie, actually, the sleeping cabin is being pushed further back from the shoreline. The total existing lot coverage is 2.73%, and the proposed lot coverage after the redevelopment will bring the total up to 9.57%. So as for the redevelopment, the applicants are requesting permission to redevelop the subject property by constructing a new recreational dwelling unit with an abutting screen porch and a covered deck. A demolition permit will be required to remove the existing recreational dwelling unit. And as proposed, the new recreational dwelling unit, as well as its accompanying decks, will have a gross floor area of approximately 114 square meters, which roughly translates to about 1,235 square feet. The height of the proposed recreational dwelling unit will be 8.18 meters, which is 27 feet. And that is the allowable height, within the allowable height within the seasonal residential zone. The setback from the high water mark will be 14.9 meters, which roughly translates to about 49 feet to the screen porch, and approximately 15.6 meters or 51 feet from the proposed dwelling unit. And as proposed, the development will result in a net increase in total lot coverage from 2.73% to 9.57%. Which is well within the seasonal residential zones allocated 15%. As previously mentioned, the application will serve to not change or have any effect or bearing on the existing accessory structures on the subject property, and will further improve upon the existing high watermark setback. This application presently before council must maintain conformity to the PPS, the growth plan, as well as the townships and counties official plans, as well as the township zoning bylaw. So once again, we return to the PPS and the growth plan. Both of these plans permit resource-based residential development within rural areas, while also including certain policies to protect significant natural heritage features. Section 4.2.45 of the growth plan permits infill development within the 30-meter vegetation protection zone, provided that the development restores to the maximum extent possible the ecological features and functions of the developed shoreline. The proposed development will not be developed entirely within the existing building footprint, and it is being pushed further back from the shoreline than the existing recreational dwelling unit. There was a scoped EIS conducted on the property or on the site, which acknowledges the increase in the current setback and the standards of the 30-meter setback. However, due to topographic restraints and other natural heritage features located just south of the subject lot, the EIS concludes that that maintaining the proposed setbacks under this application will not pose any negative impacts on the natural heritage features, nor the ecological functions of the lake and nearby woodlands. Provided, obviously, that the recommendations of the EIS are implemented before, during, and after the development has taken place. Therefore, a condition has sort of been placed on this zone that the development or the recommendations of the EIS are to be implemented and adhered to. Therefore, this application maintains conformity with the PPS and the growth plan. Just a little bit about the county's official plan. This property is also designated as shoreland areas in the waterfront. Policies of the county's official plan permit residential land use development within the shoreline areas, while also requiring or encouraging, I should say, the protection and restoration of natural heritage features. The plan states that the built form along the shoreline should not dominate the natural form, and encourage the provision of access to the waterfront for public and private users. To mitigate the impacts of the proposed development on the shoreline, the EIS recommends a variety of measures in place in order to ensure the integrity of the natural environment is being protected and not compromised. Some of these measures include sediment control measures, no in-water works, completion of construction outside bird nesting seasons, etc. It is a township planning opinion that the application conforms to the spirit and intent of the county's official plan. Now to the township's official plan, the subject property is also designated as shoreline. The township's OP recognizes that permanent and recreational dwelling units are permitted uses in the shoreline designation. All development in the shoreline designation are required to incorporate a minimum 30-meter setback standard from the high water mark of all lakes across the township. And section 3.341B23 of the OP states that minor variances and zoning changes to accommodate proposed expansions of a structurally permanent nature to existing structures that further reduces any applicable minimum water yard setback shall not be permitted unless it's a matter of public health. Furthermore, on existing lots of record where it is not possible to achieve the 30-meter setback, new buildings shall be set back as far as possible. An EIS also may be required in these situations to determine the appropriateness of the reduced setback. As previously mentioned, the redevelopment of the existing cottage will take place within that 30-meter high watermark setback. And this is mainly due to topographic considerations and sloping characteristics. Therefore, the proposed location of the new recreational dwelling unit is justified from a planning perspective. Additionally, the proposed new recreational dwelling unit will be set further back from the existing, from the shoreline than the existing recreational dwelling unit, and this constitutes a net improvement to the site. The applicants were also willing to engage in the services of qualified ecologists to assess the impact of the development on natural heritage features. The EIS concluded that the proposed location of the new recreational dwelling unit, as well as any other structures such as the new garage, is not anticipated to result in any detrimental effects on the natural heritage or hydrologic features of the site. It is the township planning opinion, therefore, that the application maintains the spirit and intent of the township's official plan. And finally, the zoning bylaw, according to Schedule A1 of bylaw number 1995-42 as amended, the subject property is currently zoned seasonal residential, and if approved, the application will serve to rezone the subject lands to Special Districts 270 or SC 270, which introduces certain site-specific regulations. As previously mentioned, the approval of this application will have no effect of altering any existing accessory structure on the proposed lot. The application will serve to legally permit an existing legal non-compliant sleeping cabin. Accordingly, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment being submitted for council's consideration includes certain site-specific setbacks and other provisions intended to legally recognize reduced setbacks for the redevelopment of the cottage. And therefore, following our review and assessment of this application within the context of relevant land use planning policies, it is the township's planning opinion that the subject application conforms to the growth plan, the county of Peterborough's official plan, the township's local official plan, the zoning bylaw, as well as maintaining consistency with the PPS, which is the provincial policy stage. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you, Arya. All right, is there anybody wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Second time, anybody wishing to speak in opposition? And third time, anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing none. Is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application?
Hi there. It's Mark Landry here. Perhaps I can just quickly introduce myself to the council and say a few quick words.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Mark Landry, and I'm the owner of the property directly adjacent to the subject property. So I'm in, I guess, lot number 69. So direct neighbor, and I'm fully supportive of the amendment. So wanted to voice my support to the council as a direct neighbor.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, then, for the second time, is there anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application? And the third time, anybody go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's Holly Richards Conley again. I'm the agent on the file.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a few things. We had Peterborough Public Health out to the property to assess and inspect the septic, and a new septic is not required. The existing one is sufficient for the redevelopment of the property. And I also just wanted to speak a little bit about why the location of the proposed dwelling was chosen. You can sort of see a dashed/dotted line that runs on the lake side of the dwelling. We worked closely with Crow Valley to ensure that this new location was outside of the erosion development zone that Crow Valley puts on properties. So that's why the cottage was moved back and placed where it was from Crow Valley.
Okay, thank you. All right, for the third time, is anybody else wishing to speak in favor of this application? Or anything to add? Hearing none, seeing none, I'll open up to council. Anybody have any questions or comments around this application? Okay, well, there is a recommendation here that it be passed and that the recommendation of the scoped environmental impact statement be implemented into development stage and monitored through the applicable process. So that's the recommendation. Does somebody want to move that? Moved by Councillor Clement, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? And that's it. Okay, then. Next, if we could, we can get these bylaws out of the way. There's 3 bylaws for zoning bylaw amendments. The first bylaw is 2023-048 for wild. Oh, sorry, I gotta get my this. They didn't want. Okay, motion to come out of move out of the zoning part of the meeting and go back into the public meeting. Moved by Councillor or Deputy Mayor Webb, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor, and that's carried. Okay, now we can do these bylaws. So the first bylaw here is 2023-048 zoning bylaw amendment for wild. Everyone move it. Moved by Deputy Mayor Webb, seconded by Councillor Clements. All in favor, and that's carried. Second one here is for Hasty, and that's 2023-049 special district 269. Somebody wanted to move that one? Moved by Councillor Clement, seconded by Deputy Mayor Webb. All in favor, and that's carried. And the third one was for, did I do Hasty? Yeah. Okay, yeah, and then the next one is Retzer. Yeah, it's zoning bylaw amendment 2023-050 special district 370. If somebody wanted to move that bylaw. Moved by Councillor Flagler, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? That's carried. All right, then. So next we're gonna move into committee of adjustment with Deputy Mayor Webb in the chair. I'll look for motion to bring to committee of adjustment. Moved by Councillor Clement, seconded by Councillor Flagler. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the Committee of Adjustment. I'll call this public meeting order and remind the members of the committee of the requirement to disclose any pecuniary interest and general nature thereof if the occasion arises. The public meeting is held under section 45 of the Planning Act and its regulations. We'll now have our planning consultant area present first of 3 minor variance reports today. Oh, I'm sorry. We will have Alicia represent the first of. I apologize, Alicia. I got ahead of myself.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Awesome. Well, again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to committee through you. And this presentation this morning is going to be for minor variance file number A1523. And first, I'd like to start off with a bit of an explanatory note to the committee regarding the nature of this application. And the applicant is proposing to tear down and rebuild an existing dwelling on the subject site. And the property is zoned rural and designated rural, and it's over 20 hectares, which is nearly 51 acres in size. And I wanted to note this just because I know that councils and committee are often in receipt of applications for zoning bylaw amendments for tear down and rebuilds in the township. And in those cases where a zoning bylaw amendment has historically been required is because those lots are often on the shoreline, they're undersized, and they're zoned and designated for shoreline residential purposes. So in those cases, tear down and rebuilds of cottages aren't necessarily considered minor. However, in this case, this site-specific context, the site is zoned rural, it's designated rural, it is an oversized lot being over 20 hectares. And that is why the township felt that this tear down and rebuild application could move forward as a minor variance rather than a zoning bylaw amendment. Something else important to note about this site that may sort of differ from, general tear down and rebuild applications that council would see in the township is that this is because it's in the rural zone, there are actually permissions to permit a principal dwelling and an additional residential dwelling on the site. And there are currently 2 dwellings on this 20-hectare site. So the dwelling that's proposed to be removed as part of this tear down and rebuild currently is approximately 41 square meters, which is about 500 square feet. And the new dwelling is proposed in total to be approximately 194 square meters or 2,092 square feet. And the ground floor area of this dwelling will be approximately 100 square meters or 1,080 square feet. So the entirety of this new structure will overall be larger, more prominent, and considerably more livable than the other dwelling on the site, which is approximately 89 square meters or 960 square feet on the ground floor. And these are all sort of important things to note because of the variance that's being requested that I'll get into a little bit more detail further in this presentation. But I just wanted to clarify that the new dwelling that is proposed is considered to be the principal dwelling, while the other existing dwelling on the site will be considered an additional or an accessory dwelling unit, and that's permitted with the zone. So now I'm going to kind of delve into the formal part of this application presentation. The property owner is listed on the application as Bennett Mechanical Installations 2001 Limited. The property address is 1159 Van Sickle Road, roll number 15310100061160. As I mentioned previously, the property is nearly 51 acres. It's zoned rural and it's designated rural in the township's official plan, and the property is in the Belmont ward. Now, the purpose of this minor variance application is to seek relief from 2 sections of the bylaw, section 4.35 and section 4.37, to permit the redevelopment of the site through the demolition of one of the existing dwellings and constructing a new 2-story principal dwelling. And the application will have the following effects. 1, to permit the continued use of the other existing dwelling unit as the accessory dwelling unit. 2, by permitting a smaller principal dwelling that is similar in size to the additional dwelling unit. As such, the additional dwelling unit, which is the sort of existing dwelling unit that you can see towards the north of the site, is not proposed to be altered through this application, and it is to have an area that exceeds 60% of the ground floor area of the newly proposed principal dwelling unit per section 4.35, instead being 89% of the ground floor area of the principal dwelling unit. And number 3, reducing the minimum required setback to the high water mark from 30 meters or 100 feet per section 4.37 to 15.3 meters or just over 50 feet. And the recommendation is that the minor variance application A1523 for the redevelopment of the existing principal dwelling within the setback to the high watermark and is of a similar size to the existing additional residential unit be approved with the following conditions. That the development be completed in accordance with the site plan submitted that you can see on the screen. That any requisite approval be received by applicable approval authorities prior to the building permit being issued. That a building permit be issued within 18 months of the approval of this application. And upon submission to the building department of the appropriate application, fees and supporting information as required by the chief building official, and that the balance of the information in this report be received. So currently, the dwelling that is to be replaced is 15.2 meters from the high water mark of the Crow River. And the new dwelling is proposed to be marginally set back from what is existing now to be 15.3 meters from the high water mark of the Crow River. And there are multiple wetland areas on the site. So as I mentioned, it's a very large site, but it's also quite wet. So the extent to which the dwelling can actually be set back further from the river is constrained. Further, as the developable area on the site where the current dwelling exists and the new dwelling is proposed is constrained in all directions by either the river or the wetlands. So the setbacks to the new septic system that is proposed will also be constrained. And based on the recommendations of both the environmental impact study and an associated addendum that was prepared by Oak Ridge Environmental, as well as being in line with the policy guidance and zoning regulations, which stipulate that the development should be set back, 30 meters from the high water mark. The septic for the new dwelling will be set back 30 meters from the high water mark of Crow River, but will only be set back approximately 15 meters from the wetland areas to the southeast. And this configuration is the preferred configuration to locate the septic as far away from the river as possible, and then to develop the cottage or the principal dwelling within the already disturbed lands on the site. And the applicant has worked closely with township staff and the consulting environmental professionals to locate the new dwelling and the septic appropriately. Now, because there are 2 dwellings on the site, the other variance is required to permit the size of the new dwelling, which is the proposed principal dwelling compared to the other dwelling, which will be considered the additional residential dwelling. And that is proposed to remain where it is, unchanged currently, further north on the site. Now, section 4.35 of the zoning bylaw requires that an additional dwelling unit should have an area that does not exceed 60% of the ground floor area of the principal dwelling, and that the additional dwelling unit be clearly subordinate to the principal dwelling. The existing additional residential unit is just over 89 square meters, which does exceed 60% of the proposed ground floor area of the newly proposed dwelling, because the ground floor area of the new dwelling is about 100 square meters. So it'll be about 89% of the ground floor area. Though this variance is required, the intent of this provision of the bylaw is still met, because there will be a clear distinction that this new dwelling is the principal dwelling and that the additional residential dwelling will be subordinate. The new dwelling that's proposed, as I had mentioned, it has a ground floor area of 100 square meters, but overall floor area does exceed that because it is a 2-story dwelling. There's going to be living spaces and bedrooms on both floors. It'll comprise of, as I said, a greater floor area overall, and it will also include decks and balconies within the sort of identified setback of this dwelling, and to appreciate the amenity of the Crow River waterfront. So the overall scale and use of the principal dwelling clearly distinguishes itself as the principal. And based on all of this information, the application meets the 4 tests for a minor variance. It's in keeping with the provincial policy statement, and it does meet the intent of the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. As such, it is my recommendation that this application be approved. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions, of course.
Thank you for that, Alicia. Is the applicant or agent present with us today? No, that's not. We'll move right on. Is there anyone present or online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Second time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Is there anyone present or online wishing to speak in favor of this application? Not hearing anyone. No one online. Second time, anyone wishing to speak in favor? Third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in favor? No comments from the public, so I'll open up to members of committee adjustment. Comments or motion.
It's quite a big piece of property. Yeah, well, I would be prepared to move this with the recommendation here from staff that this move ahead.
You got a motion from Mayor Martin to approve the recommendation of a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Clement. Comments or questions? All in favor? And that's passed. Thank you. We'll move on to our second location today, and this time we have Mary.
Through to the chair, application A 1623 for property owners Gentian Vermat and Patrick Carew, or Peru, I should say, with municipal address 165 Fire Route 85N in the Methuen ward, the legal description being part lot 25, concession 9, currently zoned as island residential as well as open space zones. The property holds a shoreline designation under the township's official plan. And the nature of this proposed development is the redevelopment of an existing bunkie with no further expansions, as illustrated by the site plan above. I believe the old structure is rather dated in terms of its construction quality. Therefore, a redevelopment would be required. The purpose of this minor variance application is as follows. Number one, seek relief from section 4.37 and 12.2.1C. Having the following effects: reducing the minimum required high watermark setback from 30 meters to 11 meters, reducing the minimum required front yard setback from 21.3 meters to 11 meters as well. Number two, seek relief from section 4.10BA, having the following effects: permitting the redevelopment of an existing legal non-complying sleeping cabin to its existing footprint with no further reductions in setback standards. And finally, number three, seek relief from section 4.40A and C, having the following effects: permitting the redevelopment of an existing sleeping cabin within the front yard, abutting the shoreline, as required under, or sorry, as permitted, as per section 4.40A, and also permitting the redevelopment of an existing sleeping cabin to a square footage above 320 square feet. The recommendation of my report is that minor variance application A 1623 for the redevelopment of an existing sleeping single-story sleeping cabin be approved with the following conditions: that the development be completed in accordance with the site plan submitted, that the maximum ground floor area of the existing sleeping cabin be no larger than 42.73 square meters, which roughly translates to about 460 square feet. That the development meet all setback standards required to pertain, setback requirements pertaining to hydro easements as well as sewage systems. That a 20-day appeal period lapse prior to the issuance of a permit, and that a building permit be issued within 18 months of the approval of this application. And as my report stipulates, the township has determined that the application meets all four tests of a minor variance. It is also consistent with the provincial policy statement, as well as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. This application was circulated to all applicable agencies, inclusive of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Peterborough Public Health. We circulated this application to MNRF mainly because of the fact that this property falls within Jack Lake and there are no conservation authorities, or Jack Lake does not fall within the watershed jurisdiction of any conservation authority at the moment. So far, no comments have been received in opposition to this minor variance application. And that being said, this application is appropriate for committee's approval, which would be my recommendation. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for the report, Arya. Is the applicant or agent present with us today? Ron, is there anyone present or online wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Second time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Third time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the application? Is there anyone present or online today wishing to speak in favor of this application? Second time, anyone wishing to speak in favor? Third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in favor? They're very popular today. I'll open up to the members of the committee for comments or a motion. Councillor Clement, go ahead.
Sorry, when I sent you my list of questions, did you say is this on an island or is it on a federal? I missed that, sorry.
Through to the chair, it is on an island, I believe. So the zone of the property is island residential, and there's a slight little area of the property that is also zoned open space. This entire development is taking place in the island residential.
So now to get equipment out there, they need a barge.
Through to the chair, I would expect so,
Okay, I'm
but
just thinking about water levels. That kind of stuff
Yep.
covered.
I think the agent here had couple technical. Holly, do you want to go ahead? Do you have a comment?
Sorry, I wouldn't let me unmute myself. It's road access.
Oh,
It's not bad. It's a road access
road access, okay.
and it's on a peninsula.
It's not really an island.
Through to the chair, it's still zone island residential.
Okay.
That, why would it, sorry, just general question, why would it, is it a peninsula kind of, or is it like?
Through the chair, I believe it's on a peninsula, and some properties that are on peninsula, there's zone island residential. It's pretty much the same as the seasonal residential zone. However, there's just certain little tweaks in like the minimum size area and acreage and frontage requirements. That's really it.
Thank you for your clarification. Councilor Doherty, go ahead.
Does the island have a better zoning and conditions than seasonal residential or worse? Or are they the same?
Through to the chair, can you please clarify that question?
Well, is there advantages to having an island zoning versus seasonal residential or vice versa?
Through to the chair, I don't believe that there's an advantage to each. It's just one is zone island residential and the other one's seasonal residential. I'm not sure what to tell you there. Some properties that are on
Well, if
island.
they're the same, why would we have the two zoning? I guess this is, but that's another story.
Not up to me.
Oh, good question, Councilor Doherty, but I think staff can get that answered for you.
Well, and sorry, and it really is confusing when you can island, then you see a roadway driveway into an island. I do it's the same as. Where the bridge was, but yeah, actually, thank you.
So, yep.
Yeah, so-
Martin, go ahead.
So this might be for Holly, but should it have been rezoned at the time of this application, then if it's, like, I'm surprised too that it's island, but it's, and then with it having it in front, like, so when I thought it was an island, lots of times when you see something like this in front of the cottage, or whatever, a lot of times it has to be beside or behind, when you do applications like this. So with islands, sometimes we're a little more flexible because it's got water all the way around it and it's, there's not much you can do, but being that there's a road that says driveway on the back of it, I'm just kind of surprised that it, you know, that we're allowing this to be rebuilt in front of the cottage if there is room out back, so.
Through,
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair. So there were permits that were taken out for the dwelling, or sorry, the sleeping cabin. So it's a legal structure. They are afforded rights under the Planning Act. And so they're not increasing any footprint. They're not increasing anything really. It's just redeveloping an old structure.
Councilor Doherty, go ahead.
Well, they aren't enlarging the footprint, but they're doubling the size.
Through the chair, it is already over the size, so they're just redeveloping it to the existing.
Excuse me, what does redevelopment mean?
Through the chair, it would be the demolition of the structure and building into the building of the structure again.
So the existing bunkie is going to be demolished.
The existing bunkie is going to be demolished and built to the existing footprint, the same footprint, no size increase.
Okay, so it's an ideal time to correct whatever we want to be there, or is it as far as back from the shoreline as it can? I'm just trying to get a little clarity here.
I believe, I think we're getting very caught up in like the semantics of the property. I wasn't in charge of doing the zoning maps. I mean, this was just the zone of the property. That's really it.
I don't think this has anything to do with the zoning. This is a question is, we're tearing down a building and rebuilding another one and putting it under the umbrella of the legal non-conforming use. Am I understanding that right?
Through to the chair, it is a legal non-complying structure. Again, legal non-complying. It was done through permits. And so they're just redeveloping it to the existing footprint. No size structure being increased. That's it.
Well, sorry, through you, Chair. I get a little hung up on no change when you're doubling the size of something. There is a change. It's just the footprint that's remaining the same, right?
The footprint is being the same. However, the structure was always there. It was built with a permit legally. And so it was still oversized at the time. It was built in the 60s, 70s, and they're just redeveloping it. That's really it.
Go ahead.
Or three.
Councilor.
Area. So when it's doubling in size, is it going up? Like the footprint, I understand. You're gonna use the same foundation So it's not enlarging that way, so is it going up? Is that, what makes the bigger space?
Through the chair, there is no size being increased, no scale in terms of height, no setback standards are being reduced.
So it's like.
The structure is literally, it's almost like rebuilding this entire room back to the existing size. That's it. That's really. There's no size increase being, I saw here.
Okay.
So it's a two-story we have there now, one story? Is it gonna be a two-story though?
It's a one, it's gonna be a one.
Still one story.
So it's like for like, basically.
Pretty much.
Okay. Yeah.
So any other comments or questions from the committee? We've had a good discussion here on this. So I'll look for a motion. Mayor Martin, go ahead.
Working with this minor variance, I'll move it.
So motion from Mayor Martin to approve the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Flagler. Any comments, questions? I'll call a question, all in favor? And that's passed. Thank you very much for that. We'll move on to our third and final minor variance report. All right. The name with me.
Chair, application A1723 for property owner Anna Gachowska with municipal address 36 Fire Rock 57D in the Belmont ward. Legal description being part lot 30, concession 1, currently zoned as seasonal residential. The property also holds a shoreline designation under the official plan. So the nature of this development is also the redevelopment of an existing structure. It was built with permits and an existing structure on the property. And then they're just redeveloping it to the existing foundation. No setback standards are being reduced as a result. The purpose of this minor variance application, again, as stipulated, is permit the redevelopment of an existing accessory shed, as well as the development of 2 awnings on existing uncovered decks. And these are 2 crank awnings. The effect of this application is as follows. Number 1, seek relief from section 4.37, having the following effects. Number 1, reducing the minimum required high watermark setback from 30 meters to 7.62 meters. Number 2, seeking relief from section 4.10 VA, having the following effects, permitting the redevelopment of an existing legal non-complying shed to its existing footprint with no further reductions in setback standards. And permitting the increase of a deficiency to develop awnings on 2 existing uncovered decks. And number 3 and final, seek relief from sections 4.1E and E4, having the following effects. Reducing the minimum required side yard setback for accessory structures from 3 meters to 2.13 meters. And reducing the minimum required separation from an accessory structure to any other structure or building located on the same lot from 1.5 meters to 0.8 meters. The recommendation on my report is that minor variance application A1623 for the redevelopment of an existing single-story sleeping cabin, oh sorry, not single-story sleeping cabin, a storage shed, be approved with the following conditions. That the minor variance application A17 again, with the following conditions, that the development be completed and completed with in accordance with the site plan submitted, that the maximum ground floor area of the shed be no larger than 18.5 square meters, which roughly translates to about 200 square feet, that the development meet all setback requirements pertaining to hydro easements and sewage requirements or sewage systems, that a 20-day appeal period lapse prior to the issuance of a building permit, and that a building permit be issued within 18 months of the approval of this application. As my report stipulates, Township has determined that the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance. It is also consistent with the provincial policy statement as well as the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The application was circulated to all applicable agencies, inclusive of the Conservation Authority and Health Unit. So far, no comments have been made or received in opposition to the minor variance application. That being said, this application is appropriate for committee's approval. And that concludes my report for the committee.
Thank you for the report, Aria. Is the applicant or agent present with us today? So is there anyone present or online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Second time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Third time, anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Is there anyone present or online today wishing to speak in favor of this application? Second time, anyone wishing to speak in favor? Third and final time, anyone wishing to speak in favor? No comments here from the public, so I'll open up the floor to the members of the committee for comments or a motion. Councilor Doherty, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Maybe I didn't hear it properly, but there's no change in the footprint at all. Building's going back on the same structure, right?
Through the chair, yes, that's absolutely correct. It's almost like the same application prior.
Then, okay, that's good. Then why are we getting relief to the setback requirements if it's the very same as it was before?
Through to the chair, I believe that's just more or less a formality. You just have to, whenever you do one of these minor variance applications, you go through all of the regulations, and if the structure is legal, you have to provide the relief from the zoning bylaws, more or less just a formality.
Any other comments, questions from the owners? Somebody willing to make a motion on the application? Councilor Clement, go ahead.
That's just according, everything I read, it's the same that I prepared to follow through, yes.
So we got a motion to approve from Councilor Clement. Do we have a seconder? Mayor Martin? You're seconding that?
Yeah.
Or any comments or questions? Before I call a question. All in favor of the motion? That's passed. Thank you very much for the report today, Aria and Alicia, if she's still there. I apologize. I'll take a motion to adjourn the public meeting, return back to the regular council meeting. Moved by Councilor Clement, seconded by Councilor Doherty. All in favor? Right.
All right, thank you, Deputy Mayor Webb. Okay, so we're back into the regular meeting, and we're going to move into staff reports with follow-up action. And the item that we have on here is Deputy Building Inspector Rob Lamar is going to do a report on the long-term care.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this is the next in the series of reports that the council has considered related to the development of 628 Old Dogwood Road for the purpose of accommodating a 128 bed long-term care facility. The last report that council considered was a report that provided council with a summary of the results of an RFP, a request for proposal that the municipality did. We were seeking interest in the development of the property for the purposes of a long-term care facility. Council approved awarding the right to develop the property to Aon Inc. And since that decision, Aon Inc. has been working with the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care and have been successful in executing a development agreement for that purpose. In addition, of course, staff have been working with Aon to complete a review of their submission for a building permit application. And in addition to that, of course, we also completed a review of their site plan submission. One part of the recommendation before council this evening. So ultimately, this is kind of the culminating report whereby council actually authorizes the mayor and the clerk to execute several agreements that would allow the project to move forward to the construction phase. So before council are three bylaws that would authorize the mayor and clerk to do essentially to execute a site plan agreement with Aon to sell the property, to execute an agreement of purchase and sale with Aon, and thirdly, it's related to an option to repurchase the property should the project not move forward in an orderly fashion. In this case, effectively, construction to have begun within 1 year. So that agreement would allow the municipality to repurchase the property in that context. Yeah, so I think it's a relatively good news story. I did indicate in the in the report that I would provide council with a bit of an update on the tender process. I think council's aware that that Aon issued tenders and received tenders on the 11th of July. So the way that their tender system worked, as I've discussed it with their people, is they're the general contractor and they've issued tenders for foundation, framing, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, roofing, all of the components. They've gotten reasonable responses for each of the trades for the most part. And they're going through them as we speak. So there aren't any red flags, but again, it's quite a cumbersome process to go through all of those and understand exactly what they mean, because they've got several submissions on each of these different trades. So essentially that's the update. No red flags to speak of, but it's an ongoing process that they'll carry on dealing with the respondents to their tender. So I feel that the recommendation before council is appropriate to move forward with, and it's the extent of my. Sure.
Okay, thank you. This is great news. Hopefully it keeps moving along. It seems to be pointing in the right direction anyway, so that's all we can ask for. So there is a recommendation here. I'll open up the council. If there's any questions for Rob before we look at the recommendation here. So go ahead, Steph.
Hi, Bob. Actually, that's all great news and I'm all for it. The one question I do have is the medical center. Is that on that plan as well? Or is that something that the township has to look at after the long-term care is done?
Yeah, so I guess the only thing I could say about that is that the development as it's being proposed,
Right.
doesn't preclude us from, or preclude the development of the site with a medical center. There is no medical center proposed with this application.
Okay, yeah, with this, but is the medical center still on that? Like if they're buying the property, so do we lose that spot for the medical center, or is that going to be built at a later date?
Yeah, so at this point, we would have to negotiate with the landowner ultimately, right? To develop that site for the purposes of a medical center. So what we can say is that there's sufficient area. Somebody had put some thought into developing the site with a medical center at some point in the past. And they located it essentially a small addition to the building that's being proposed today.
Right.
At the front of it. And I couldn't find any documentation that essentially imposed a requirement on Aon to develop it for that purpose, right? So, so what we wanted to make sure of as staff was that the opportunity to develop it for that purpose wasn't scuppered, right, by developing the site the way they are. So there's an opportunity in the future, but we would have to negotiate that with the landowner at the time, right? If that was something that we thought was a need.
Okay, so then if the landowner decides, no, we don't want to do that, then that little piece of property is just going to be vacant now?
Well, there's no, I was thinking of just developing the site, the six and change acre site upon which this building is being proposed can accommodate. But we also have an adjacent parcel, right, that is still municipally owned.
Okay.
That could be developed for that purpose in the future. But the only discussion that I could find was related to developing this site that we're talking about today for that purpose as well.
So in discussion with Aon, when I was talking to them, because that was one of the questions, and they were pretty well the same as us, that they wanted to keep focused on the long-term care, but the medical center is not out of the question. Similar to when we discussed this years ago and we had a plan for it, and even Aon said you might want to relook at that plan because it was huge. It was there was like 10 rooms plus a dental office, and at the time it was $400 a square foot. Now it's $800 a square foot. You might want to downsize it, but it's not off the table. They're willing to look at it as a second phase, but they didn't want to cloud up or muck up the long-term care side of things. So for today, that's what this part would be dealing with, and keeping it moving. I want to hold it up any. So But there's, so there is a recommendation here, but, Deputy Mayor, whether you had a question?
Yeah, just for clarity, Rob, what we're doing today is we're transferring the property to Aon, right, to build this, so. I know this means we're going out to the public, so. Say this goes awry and it doesn't get built, what are the steps that we have to get this property back, basically, is what I'm getting at, can you walk us through?
Yeah.
So that the members of the public don't think we're just handing Aon a piece of property here.
Sure. Yeah, so essentially what the agreement to repurchase would enable us to do is that 1 year after selling the property to them, we'll be in a position, should they fail to meet the obligation of starting the project, we'd be in a position to send them a letter and saying, look, we want the property back. And they would have to sell it to us, you know, for essentially the $2 that they bought it.
And in the agreement as well, there's many stipulations in terms of that's basically all they can put there. They can't take this and use it for future investment or something else that they'd like to do, right?
Yeah, so there's as part of the agreement of purchase and sale, there's a schedule attached to that agreement that says very specifically that the property can only be developed for the purposes of a 128-bed long-term care facility and a medical center. They couldn't develop for any other purpose.
Thank you for that, Rob.
Okay, all right, then, any other questions?
Sorry,
No, go ahead.
why a year?
Well, I think that I'm sure it's completely arbitrary, but the idea being that really they're obligated to start in August, right? And if they don't, I guess, and they had, I don't know, reasonable, you know, reasons for not moving forward, we wanted to give enough time for them to deal with any issues that might arise, right? So again, we didn't want to make it a short period, but again, 1 year, I think is a reasonable time frame for them to address any outstanding issues that might come about. They're not likely, but
When you consider the original site plan was done in 2009, there's been 14 years of ironing out the wrinkles on this. So I'm a little curious as to why a year, because either they're going to build it or they aren't. And I think that's, I hear all the good news, but there's not much difference in what we're talking about today than what we talked about before, and it didn't get built. So I guess if it doesn't get built, I just want to make sure we, as the deputy mayor, if we get the land back and quickly, because this has to be drawn to a conclusion.
yeah, I guess it was a decision taken amongst staff that we thought we wanted to give a reasonable amount of time for them to address any issues that might come about, but not so much as to, you know, to usurp our ability to move forward with the development of the property at some point in the future, right?
Yeah.
And let's hope we don't need that clause. That will be the.
Not that this will happen, but there might be an extension. There's a possibility of an extension on this, is there not? I know it hasn't really been discussed, but I'm just saying, in terms of that, if we did something, what are we up here 6 months, we might have to rewrite the agreement, right? So as he said, a year is a year, and
I think, yeah,
chances are we aren't going to be developing it, and that if this doesn't go, we're not going to be using it within the next 10 to 12 months. So we'll give Aon a chance.
because it'll have to be rezoned back if it wasn't used for this. We would have to go through the process of rezoning the other way to something else, because right now that's all it can be used for is the long-term care. So that being said, but you know, everything is positive here as far as this is just little clauses that we had to have in there to make sure that we keep the property. Hopefully we don't keep the property and this thing keeps going like it is, because it's between the province changing the process and how their billing goes. I think that's what opened it up here and made it more inviting. There has been a lot of changes since the first thing was done. And that's what happened on the last tender. But with this new funding announcement from the province, this thing, you know, everything's pointing in the right direction. So we just wanted to make sure we had that clause, like Deputy Mayor saying, that we, you know, it's still our property until this thing starts. That being said, the year does seem long, but it's not really that long as far as to get things moving. We can get a lot of paperwork out of the way in the meantime, but I like to think positive and think that that's just a clause that hopefully we're not using, and we move on here. So go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Through you, Chair. I didn't see in any of the proposal, and I assume we haven't, so it could be a rhetorical question, but this has been approved by our solicitor.
Yes, absolutely. He developed a site plan agreement and other.
And we have that on file because it's the guy that's gonna have to deal with it. Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation here is to move these three bylaws into the bylaw portion of the meeting. So moved by Deputy Mayor Webb that we do that, and seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Oh, you're welcome.
So, okay, so we're gonna move into the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna move into the bylaw portion of this, and we already dealt with three bylaws. So the fourth bylaw here is to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a site plan agreement between the corporation of Township of Havelock-Belmont-Methuen and Aon for the lands municipally known as 628 Old Norwood Road. So that motion there, moved by Deputy Mayor Webb, seconded by Councillor Clement, all in favor, that's carried. Second is the bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement on the purchase and sale of Aon Inc. for the lands municipally known as 628 Old Norwood Road. Mover. Councillor Clement. Deputy Mayor Webb, all in favor, and that's carried. And this number 6 here, a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement with Aon for the exclusive option to purchase the lands municipally known as 628 Old Norwood Road. Over. Okay, question?
Sure, so $2, Rob, where does that fall into this one? $2 that we're gonna charge them?
Well, through Mr. Chair, yeah, Mr. Chair, sorry, it applies to both the agreement of purchase and sale. But that was the offer that was made by to purchase, that was the amount, and the same applies to the repurchase.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so you're moving that. Okay, do I have a seconder for that bylaw? Sure. Okay, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Perfect job.
Yeah.
Thank you, Arya. Okay, our next item here is a confirming bylaw for today's meeting. Motion to confirm bylaw. Yeah.
Confirm bylaw.
Okay, that's moved by Councillor Clement, seconded by Deputy Mayor Webb. All in favor? That's carried. Motion to adjourn. Yeah, you're just putting it up there.
Not a normal meeting.
No, everything's kind of upside down. So moved by Deputy Mayor Webb that we adjourn. Second. Councillor Clement, all in favor?